So, Ashley, go ahead and ask your question.
Um, well, I was more just checking in. So I read the additional three suttas you recommended. So the Sava Sutta, the Ratha Vinata Sutta, and the Kosambiya Sutta. So basically, suttas 2, 24, and 48 from the Majjhima Nikaya.
Okay, all right.
So what I can see, what I think I see here is like a sort of, in these three sutras, it's sort of like the progress of awakening, sort of outlined. Number two being sort of the how you do it, or one of the hows, and then numbers 24 and 48 are sort of like the framework, you could say, or like the way you progress through it.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Right.
Most
So
people, most people will learn about Buddhism for a long time without having this stuff spelled right out there. This is actually the path. This is actually the mental states that one goes through.
right.
Especially Sutta number 48 is especially well laid out.
Yeah, I found that one very I found both of these quite a lot easier to understand than I don't know. You know, reading this stuff, it's not as complicated as it seems to be, or it doesn't, like this number 48 is only 5 pages long, and it's these six principles. Then then it goes through the seven knowledges you get, which I imagine correlates to sort of like path attainment. So like stream entry.
He lays out the path of stream enterer,
Oh,
and he
okay then.
explains it that way if you know how to
Right.
read the text.
No, see, I just haven't read it again. I just see it's right at the end. Thus possessed of the seven factors, he possesses the fruit of stream entry. My bad. I should have did not
And
read. Do
exactly in brief, the way that it goes is number one, we have to come to the point that we know what obstructions are and to be able to throw them out of the mind. The
right.
tool we use to do that is anapanasati and the satipatthana,
Mm-hmm.
because the important thing that we're going to do is develop this thing called sati, which is to constantly remember, to remember, to remember, to remember, to remember.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because that's like the wake up call or the ding ding that brings us out of the hindrances into this present moment.
Right.
If it's an actual wake up call.
Right.
All right. So many times it's not a wake up call because people will just go back into the hindrances, but now they'll think about how hard meditation is.
Yeah.
But the real wake up call also requires an attitude change. So a
Right.
whole lot happens at that particular point in time that is well stated in other suttas, but that it does require four aspects of the Eightfold Noble Path. And that is, the first is right mindfulness to wake up. All right, to right investigation. Hello, you went away.
Sorry.
Right investigation and
Sorry. Could I just interrupt for 1 second? Sorry. I've lost you on my screen, and I find it's a lot easier to follow if I have a. All right. That makes me go. So then, can you see me?
I can now.
Okay. For some reason, you've disappeared.
The image has disappeared.
Yeah, the image has disappeared. No, you haven't disappeared. All right, that's kind of annoying.
What about turning the camera on and off? I can do that. It's off now.
Alrighty.
Now it's back on.
Oh, there we go. Perfect. Sorry about that. Please continue.
All right. What we were beginning to talk about was this actual progression.
Yep.
And the first part of the progression is to remove the hindrances of the mind.
Right.
All right. And the process that it takes to remove the hindrances of the mind actually takes 4 of the steps of the Eightfold Noble Path.
Would that be right view, right action, right speech, and then right
Nope,
mindfulness?
nope. You're way off.
Okay.
Okay, you're way
Really?
off.
Okay.
You're just trying to name 4 of the 8. The 4 are first, number 1, which I was explaining, was sati.
Right.
To remember,
Okay.
to remember. That's a path factor. All right.
Right.
And so once sati develops, we can then see that we were in a state of not watching the breath, because that's the intention. By seeing that, we see the mind, we also see that as wrong view. So now we take the effort that it takes, and for many people it takes a lot of effort, then to change that wrong view from right view. And right view at this case is I can see that the mind has wandered away from the breath, and I can pat myself on the back. That's the right view. But it takes effort to change that attitude. So right attitude, right view, right effort, and right mindfulness run in circle around each other to bring the mind out of the hindrances into the present moment, which includes the object of meditation, which in this case is breath, eventually becoming all of the satipatthana. So once the student gets to that point where they recognize that they can, no matter how obstructed the mind is, they can in fact pull the mind out of that obstruction, bring it to this present moment, and be here now.
Right.
That's the very first step that is noble, super mundane, and a factor of the path.
Right.
All right. So to come up to this first step of the noble path, which is super mundane and not ordinary, is actually nothing more than a bit of training and a major change in attitude.
Okay. I've actually been trying to take on what you said about attitude, and I haven't really been doing too much sitting meditation, but I've been trying to like have greater periods of where I'm looking at what I'm doing instead of just doing as much. So like I take a lot of walks now, and I just sort of watch the mind go here and there, and bring it back to something I choose. Usually just like the way it feels to move. That's been pretty good. I did actually do something like some sort of self-inquiry where I just asked who sees this or who perceives this, and just was like sort of asking like who, whatever was at my conscious focus at the time. And I had quite an interest.
Would you say that you're beginning to go through a lifestyle change?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. All right. Yes, that's exactly right. The waking up process actually requires kind of a lifestyle change when we become something dedicated to waking up. And this waking up that we call metaphorically within the Buddha way of digging deep into it is actually this process of right mindfulness and right effort and right view running and circling around each other, and
Right.
then adding right attitude into the mix so that you have all four of those.
Right.
All four of those things are also considered the four bases of power that is
Mm-hmm.
referred to as Iddhiyapada, and that in Buddhist religion, those are normally referred to as magical power, but uh, in the right way of understanding, or the noble way of understanding, is that these powers are powers of, let us say, well-being, the power of success, the power of being a lion, wealthy, secure, satisfied. This is one's power.
But it's a power that's within all of us, and it's just like realizing it, right? Like that's the
Not
idea. You're supposed.
no, it's not a matter of realizing it. That's not the way to think about it. Things that are needing to be developed
Right. Okay.
and
Right.
practiced.
Right.
Developed means also practiced. So in fact, to to practice not only the basis of the power, but the results of the power all at the same time is by feeling successful, by
Right.
recognizing that the mind has wandered away from the breath, or that you feel successful in the general just waking up to this present moment, which almost always accompanies a conscious deep breath.
I've noticed that. Or sometimes there's like this sort of a sinking. Like I sort of just like my body sort of, because I do like I've talked about the bio stuff I do as well, and I've noticed that sort of gets me to put myself in my body a lot. And sometimes I notice it'll be like, oh, I'm not really, I can't actually feel my body. And when I come back into it, I'm sort of haunched up into this weird position or whatever, and it's all tense. And then it's sort of like everything just sort of sinks down. Yeah. And like you said, usually there's a deep breath as well, and it feels very nice. It's like, it's okay, you know?
Mm-hmm. As you're beginning to see how anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing, and the satipatthana fit so deeply into the process of the Four Noble Truths and the development of that, because
Mm-hmm.
that's really what we're working at. The first thing to do is to get the mind fit for work.
Right.
That's the first thing. And then after the mind is fit for work, which, by the way, this change of mind at that first step also is a change of attitude that's enormously important, because it actually brings us out of the attitude of being a victim into being a winner.
Right.
So it's really a deeply buried existential life position that we start to change.
Right.
And because why? Because we say, yes, I can. No matter how obstructed the mind is, it can be cleaned out,
Right.
and I can come back to this present moment.
Just again
And that
and again, no
becomes a
matter how long it takes.
and that becomes a surety,
Yeah.
because up until that point there's going to be doubt.
Mm-hmm.
So for the beginner, there's going to be a lot of doubt even about the ability to do the meditation. But once we come to being able to do it often enough that we say that, okay, from now on, no matter what, I know that I can at least throw the hindrances, whatever in my mind, I can throw that stuff out and take a deep breath.
Mm-hmm.
All right, whether it's a song, and if it's a song, the best way to throw a song out of the brain is with another song, and then you throw both of them out. All right, and so one of the way, um, one of the most important ways, by the way, of um, throwing unappropriate thoughts of the past, of the future, of all of the hindrances, to throw those things out. Almost every time requires something that we push in there, just like we would use a
Right.
second song to throw the old first song out.
Right.
All right. So this is actually the most vital part of the practice. The most vital part of the practice is to stop thinking about unwholesome thoughts and start
Mhm.
attending to wholesome things, things that are worth thinking about.
So it's not just suppression. It's like it's actually it's not suppression whatsoever. It's actually replacement. Because I think I've done stuff like this in the past, and I even just remembered it recently. I remember I used to when I would do when I was doing just started with Thanisu Bhikkhu's method. I would like imagine when I had a distracting thought, I would imagine my breath was at my forehead and like it was sort of blowing the thought away, and I was just like, and then by doing that, obviously I focused more on the feeling of the breath at that, the forehead area, and then the thought would just sort of go away.
Why
But
did you stop doing that?
I forgot about it. I can't, I literally just thought about it today, and I was like, why did I stop that? So that'll be making the rounds again for sure. Because it worked very well too.
All right, because there is a lot of sati development that's necessary. Basically, what happens is the students don't continue to put in right effort. And part of the reason they don't put in right effort is number one, it does take effort. And number
Mm-hmm.
two, they are not able to see any results at all.
Right.
All right. So this is what's required of you is to begin to see the results right from the very beginning, right from the get-go. Yes, you can, in fact, throw any thought out of your mind and put something useful, valuable, and wholesome in the mind instead.
Right. So,
A- And you can do that without a doubt.
mm-hmm. Right.
And so now all we have to do is figure out what kinds of thoughts are not wholesome and what kind
Right.
of thoughts are wholesome.
This I do remember. I remember this stood out for me quite a bit. I think it was in the Taint Sutta. Sorry.
Yes, exactly. Now you've caught me into Saba Asava Sutta down there around verse number 8.
Yeah, here we go. I see now. This I really found the first part of this. It was so like when he attends unwisely to this way, one of six views arises in him, and it was like I just found it so powerful. It was like self exists or it does not exist. I perceive self with self. I do not. I perceive not self with self, or I perceive self with not self. Or he has some such view, such as this. This is the self of mind that speaks and feels and experiences here and there the result of good and bad actions. But this self of mine is permanent, everlasting, eternal, not subject to change, and it will endure as long as eternity. I didn't even quite get everything in it, but I just found I was like, wow, like it just stood out to me, and it was just sort of like, and I just felt like there was wisdom in it. I could tell there's wisdom in it, like it really stood out to me.
Yes, exactly so. So a little bit later, you begin to understand that he's actually looking at what is unwholesome and
Mm-hmm.
why it's unwholesome, which
Right.
leads then why it's unwholesome is because it does not lead to a beneficial state.
Right.
That if anything, it will lead to bad feelings.
Mm-hmm.
But what is worthwhile and wholesome, here's a really easy, clear example of it is that you just happen to think about something that needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start to worry about it, even if it's a month
Mm-hmm.
off.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
That's definitely a big one for me.
All right. So when you see those kind of thoughts coming, you can say, if I've already decided when I'm going to do it, then I will wait until then to have this alarm go off. I don't need it to go off right now.
Mm-hmm.
And
Then
you can take
obviously,
it just like you would close an alarm. You just shut that off.
mm-hmm. And obviously, if it is something that is vitally important, I get up and do it instead of going like, "Oh, it's important. It's gonna happen. I got to do it." You know. Then that's something I've
That's the
also.
victim. That's
Mm-hmm.
actually the expression of the victim.
Mm-hmm.
That whatever it is more important than me. It
Mm-hmm.
has power over me. It's not
Mm-hmm.
the position of the lion. The lion is raw.
Bats it away or gets up and deals with it.
Yeah, just never mind.
So when so like in particular to verse 8, where it says, "When the six views, the view self exists for me, or the view no self exists as me." So from what I've understood it from other teachers, or like, and I know that because I
That
haven't really.
particular paragraph
Mm-hmm.
is actually addressing issues that are brought up in, I think, is probably the Rig Vedas. But it's old classical Indian literature about definitions of a self.
Right.
And that the Buddha just kind of threw that in there as a memorized passage out of his past, just as a kind of micro lion's roar to see. I even remember all of that crap too.
Okay.
But literally, it's whenever we think about, all right, well, here's one of the most key issues there. What was I in the past?
Right.
Is another way of in English we would say, what was I doing in the past?
Mm-hmm.
Or what was happening in the past? Then we
Mm-hmm.
come up with like a meeting or whatever, and then off we go. So what was I
Mm-hmm.
in the past is in fact all past thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Because all past thoughts will lead to regret, they'll lead to remorse, they'll lead to problems that need to be fixed, they will lead to planning,
Mm-hmm.
they will lead to wanting and desire.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really easy to whenever any thoughts of the past come up, is to say, never mind, throw that out. I don't have to think about the past. The past is
Yeah.
finished.
I've really started to try and do that because I've noticed sometimes, like I used to have it often too, like a thought from when I was like a child or like a very young boy, and I did something super embarrassing, would come up and I'd grimace and grit my teeth, and it's like, well, why am I doing this to myself? I don't. That was years ago. Like it does. It no one remembers it except me in this moment, and then I'll forget it in like 2 seconds.
Yes. So when that stuff happens, as soon as it starts up, throw it out. Don't give it
Mm.
any energy at all. To stay out of all kinds of past, because there's a lot of vermin buried
Mm-hmm.
in our past. We buried it, buried it alive, and it's still alive.
It's like going into a graveyard and digging up all this stuff and being like, oh, why am I finding all these dead bodies and smelly corpses?
Yes, exactly. Everybody has a skeleton in the closet. The secret is don't open the closet.
Just stop opening it and looking at it every day. Like, oh,
Yeah,
there's a
don't
skeleton.
don't do it. Don't do it. So that's and you can see that the Buddha put that right there in that passage. Okay, and he says also, "What will I be in the future?" That also is that same thing. I just hear a beep beep or a buzz buzz. Did you? Is that on
That's
your
my
machine? That's yours.
yeah,
Okay.
that's my but hold on, let me just switch that app off. It's a little bell I put on to remember to, it's
Oh, never mind.
mindfulness reminder.
Never mind. Now that I know it's on your machine, there's nothing to do.
Okay. There we go. Um all right. So that's the Sabasava with the taints as well. The 5 ways of Yeah. All right. So there are the taints to be abandoned by seeing, using, avoiding, developing, enduring, and restraining.
Yes, but let's go back to verse number 11 because that's the one that's the most important.
Okay. 11. Here we go. Contemplation of the Three Noble Truths, or the Four Noble Truths. That wouldn't be a very good noble truth. It ends, but I'm not going to tell you how it ends.
All right. Well, here's the thing: is that at this point you can see the entire path action coalesces with Sutra number 24, and Sutra number 48, and Sutra number 2, all right here in this verse number 11.
Okay.
This is possibly one of the most key points for students. Okay, and that is what is worthy of our attention. Because clearly the past and the future, worries, regrets, wanting things we don't have, remorsing over having to put up with things that we don't like to put up with, like a job, and all kinds of other stuff are not worthy of our attention.
Right.
What is worthy of our attention is to look at basically reality as it is. Begin to notice what is suffering. This is suffering. What is the cause of suffering? What is actually the best part of it is what is it like to be in this at this particular point in time, in this particular moment, free from suffering.
Feels good.
Right. A little Dhammarato right now.
Yeah, a little quenching.
Okay. A little bit of heaven, self-manufactured, own schedule. So that's what you need to do is start letting yourself have little Dhammara's own schedule. Start watching for this third noble truth. It's really a ding-dong. Allow yourself to be in a state of no hunger, satisfaction. Allow yourself to be in that state that we just moments ago mentioned were the powers. Allow yourself to be in a state of satisfaction, of powerful, of wealthy, that you've got enough money, that you feel strong, secure, a lion. That's the third noble truth. Not associated with anyone. Not trying to protect yourself because you are invincible. Only you can hurt you.
Right.
And you're putting that to an end right this very moment.
Right. Yeah, I've always...
No, let that sink in.
Right.
No one can hurt you. Only you can hurt you, and you demand that you put an end to that right this very moment. And there it goes.
Yeah. That's very powerful to think about. Like, I've seen glimpses of it where it's like, like it'll be a nice moment or whatever, and then it's like a little, like a past, or like the planning thing is definitely a big one. Like sometimes I've noticed I don't want to plan as much lately because it's like it's this big list of things to do, and I'm like, ugh, and each one is sort of like, it seems so like stepping on taps purposely, like I don't know, it feels kind of annoying to do.
Well, here's the thing about things. Whenever you do things, you almost always do one thing at a time, or at most 2 or 3. But
Yeah.
generally, you're only doing one thing at a time. Like even if you're doing 2 or 3 things on the computer, you're only doing computer.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And yet, when we think about all that needs to be done, we group it all together, make it a huge cloud and a big burden.
Mm-hmm.
We manufacture that dukkha.
Mm-hmm.
We give it weight. But in
Putting it
fact,
down on paper.
but actually writing them down on paper and then checking them off would be much superior than to just feel burdened down by all of that. And yet that's how the mind works. That's called generality, that we generalize things.
Sort of all smush it together.
And then we squish it together. And we do that with pattern matching. When things match a particular pattern, then we'll mash them all together. And we've been doing that absolutely mindlessly our whole lives. And those pattern matching systems that we have put together become very much part of the habit patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to begin to break up those old habit pattern systems and start to see things clearly now so that we can develop some new patterns. Always be willing to keep on making new patterns and do pattern matching in the moment rather than relying upon old patterns. Okay, here's a clear example based upon what you just said. The things to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, a to-do list.
Mm-hmm.
A to-do list seems to just grow and grow and grow, and every time it does, it just gets more and more and more burdensome.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because anything you think that needs to be done,
Then it feels like it really must be done. And
then
it
it
becomes
feels
really significant.
right, and you become a victim of your own pattern matching equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, you become a victim of your own pattern matching equipment. Why? Because you thought of this, and then you thought of that, and then you put them together on a to-do list. And then you thought of this, and you put that on the to-do list. And you
Yeah,
mashed
it
all
never.
and you packed that all together, and now it's huge.
Yeah, I can never just have like a 3-item to-do list. As soon as I start writing, like I'll get to 3 and then it's just like bing, 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 bing. Oh wow, there's all this stuff to do, and it just, it's it's a lot of dukkha.
That's right. And so part of it is that people have a feeling of insecurity, and they think that by getting stuff done, getting things prepared, etc., like that, basically getting their mental fortress constructed, then they
Mm-hmm.
can withstand the onslaught that
Mm-hmm.
they feel is coming.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, the politicians and many, many business organizations, they always want to capitalize that. They want to keep people afraid because that's the easy way to control them.
Yeah.
And so in Buddha, we're inviting you to see that, to see those patterns, and to stop following that particular sad song.
Right.
Start seeing your own patterns in a new way. And we do that through the concept of suffering and no suffering. You begin to see for yourself what's right and what's wrong, what's suffering and no suffering. And we
Mm-hmm.
don't do it in the far distance. We don't say, oh, I'm going to do this little wrong, bad thing because I expect something good, valuable to happen later. We
Mm-hmm.
stop thinking that way. We start
Right.
thinking that suffering is in this moment, that I'm going to
Right.
tell the truth now.
Yeah, because if it's suffering now, it's not going to turn into not suffering later. It's just going to kind of balloon up because I've left it in the background and let it get all claggy and gross instead of just going, all right, see it, and then okay. All right. So this is sort of something like, should I be sort of trying to attend like in each moment, see like Because that's the Four Noble
Well,
Truths.
when you start using words like each moment, that's almost the next step into every moment, which is
Right.
only one sliver of a step to all the time, which is
Right.
right next door to suffering.
Right.
All right. A much better way of looking at it is whenever you become alert, whenever you
Mm-hmm.
wake up, whenever you develop sati, whenever you remember, do it right then.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When I say right, I mean both right then and also do it correctly and do it now. And that is become here now, do the practice correctly, which means a change of attitude, to throw that stuff out and be here now and begin to understand the nature of reality as it is.
Sorry, 1 second. Right.
And we begin to see reality as it is from a noble, higher point of view, which we'll talk about later.
Right.
When right view becomes a noble right view, it's no longer a selfish right view.
Right.
And
Could
so
I?
as we develop the Four Noble Truths, they actually become more noble because the mind becomes more noble.
Right.
And the first fetter that rots away is the personality view, the personality fetter, in the sense of, oh, it's got actually many aspects. But the important quality is to recognize that if there is a self, then that self is subject to the vagaries of its source. For
Right.
instance, the Christians have a soul. Everybody's got a soul, which means that after you're dead, we don't know about what's happening right now, but after you're dead, your soul becomes God's football.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And he's either going to dribble or punt or something.
Put it in his collection or send it down.
Yeah, right. Yeah, try a 100-yard field goal or something. Well, don't laugh at God. I mean, he's done that a lot. I think he's pretty good at it by now.
Yeah, it seems like it. He's a regular Super Bowl fanatic, isn't he?
Ah, but when we recognize, in fact, that there is no eternal soul there, and look how many people have been taught that their whole lives, especially if we're trained as children. Adults can pretty much see through that whole soul shebang. But in the time of the Buddha, you can imagine that pretty well everybody had been Brahmanized in that way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, and so, coming out of that mentality that there is an eternal soul, the Buddha did one step further. The intermediate step, which is what we would call an atheist, is the one who, being very close to the Christian, says that, all right, there is no soul after death, that when the body breaks up, that will be the end of me. That will be the also the breakup and non-existent of the being.
Right.
And the Buddha says, oh no, those two close, very, very close together.
Right.
Why? Because if the atheist thinks that he does have a self, then it's something that needs to be protected. And he spends
Right.
his whole life doing what he's told to do in service of protecting a self that does not even exist.
Right. It's like a slightly smaller time frame than the Christian, really. You know, like eternity. Then it's like however long you live, which most of the time is quite long for a lot of people. So, you know, and but it's still the same principles, I guess. You know, it's like, and that the pain that they feel comes from, it's like there's a me to protect, there's a me to improve, a me to do these things and get these things and etc. So can I ask, how does it, I feel like I've had some experiences of this where like perceptually it feels like like when I'm getting told off, I feel it feels very small, and it's like like it's like there's this field, right, and it shrinks down, and it's like the person telling me off, and then there's the me, it's just us. But if I have like that sort of, but sometimes it really opens up, and then it's just like it's just what's around me. There's no sort of me, it's just like this big field of stuff going on, and like when I do get to that big field thing, it feels very lovely, and it's like, and in fact, I notice the more I come up, the more I start going like, oh, my knee, my pain, my me, and then it's like, and as that, if there's more me to do that, it like that everything gets smaller, and then it's like everything gets sort of less nice. But if I go back to that sort of big field of awareness, it's there's not that sort of thing going on. Like there's no judgments or less judgments, I guess.
Smallness and expansion is basically all I've heard. My question would be, is that in any sense having to do with security and safety, in the sense that when you feel insecure, that you contract, and when you feel safe and secure, then it expands?
Pretty much, yeah. And like it happens, and it doesn't happen just in the sense of like living sort of thing. I notice like if that sense of, and not just in like insecure, secure, it's like and dislike. If I really like something, it seems that the space will get sort of bigger, I guess, or like not super big, but it's like there's less me around going. But if it's when it's something like I don't like this is shit, it's like that sort of field gets very small, so I guess it's like that. I guess that's the likes and dislikes coming in.
Yes, it's good that you have that kind of awareness, because that's going to become more appropriate for you to actually catch that stuff as early as you can, in the sense of just the liking or the not liking, rather than all the way into, because not liking is, if it goes crazy or goes all the way, it's going to go into terror.
It's just like it's like an interim step from like terror, and then there's not liking, then there's neutral. It's all sort of the same stuff.
Yeah, back in the 1960s, they would, on a regular basis, the government would terrorize people, and then they would lock them up in the state hospital because they, they were traumatized.
I know you're sick now. We've got to make you better.
So this is an important quality that you can see, that by watching and contemplating and understanding and working with the Four Noble Truths and seeing the processes of the mind and the feelings and all of the constituent parts. Because let's face it, the second Noble Truth is quite complicated. It's going to take several talks all on its own. But understanding the nature of suffering and how the mind works, so that in the process of seeing how the mind works, you begin to at least see that there is no magical professor behind the curtain that's actually a me pulling levers. There's no self in there. That is all process. It's all just a bunch of stuff going on, much of which I thought was me, which is in fact not me.
Yeah, I've had that experience sort of coming in a bit. Like I'm like, oh, that's definitely not me, because it's just sort of like, I don't know. I mean, can you really say like, oh, I don't like this thing? But then sometimes that changes. It's like I've had, even just something mundane like food that I hated, I eat again. I'm like, oh, this actually tastes really good. And it's like, oh, but I had this like, yuck, I don't like that. And, you know, then you try it again and it's like, oh, so that changes. You know, what my likes and dislikes aren't even very stable, you know.
Exactly. And not only that, but many times the likes and dislikes about, for instance, food that we don't like in childhood, which we find okay in adulthood, have also an emotional loading to it.
Right.
That it can trace back to one particular event at a supper table or whatever, and all of a sudden the kid does not like green peas because of the situation, and then he
Right.
doesn't like green peas for the rest of his life.
Right. But, you know, it's nothing. It's just nothing inherent in that. He might think, oh, it's just me. Green peas just taste yuck. But it's like, really, it's just that situation sort of playing out, I guess. Or like the effects of it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so um, you can see how sutta number 2, especially this first part, and if you can see it like this, understand it that it is um, the the first 3 fetters are released by seeing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, by seeing means to be able to go out of wrong view or ordinary right view into supramundane right view.
Right.
And by doing
Oh.
so, with the understanding that there is no self that is subject to outside forces, that it was a mental construction
Mm-hmm.
that you had created delusionally, and
Mm-hmm.
that the whole world and all of our society have been using your instinctual nature to control you through
Right.
this, to where in fact it was nothing at all but um, instincts and the delusion that you were worth something.
Right.
But now that you recognize that you don't even exist, how can you be worth anything at all? That means you're
Right.
no longer subject to the vicissitudes of the world.
Right.
This word that I'm using now is actually in the Pali called Sila Bhatta Paramasa.
Not to Paramasa.
Sila, you can hear the word Sila
Yep.
or virtue. Sila Bhatta
Yep.
Paramasa. And what it means is attachments to rites, rules, and rituals as if any rule, law, ritual, ceremony, etc., had its own value. Because
Right.
intrinsically nothing has any value at all.
It's the value we give it.
Right, and in Buddhism in the West, you'll find a lot of people following the rules of meditation and doing it as a ritual, thinking they will get some benefit out of doing this ritual because they were
Right.
doing what they were told to do.
Right.
All right, they didn't realize, in fact, that oh no, doing what you were told to do will never get you happy.
Right. Even the instructions of your meditation teacher.
Right, exactly. That you
Right.
have to see it for yourself. He
Mm-hmm.
Rajneesh even talked about it in the sense of I'm pointing at the moon. Don't suck on my finger. Look at what I'm pointing at.
I've always loved that quote. It's such a funny quote, and it sums it up so well. You know, like very good. Um, so I kind of see what you mean about the. Well, I think I see what you mean about what you said quite a while ago. Is stream entry is like a course correction, because if it's all about seeing, right, it's like you just sort of see, okay, all of this stuff is going to cause me pain. This is what doesn't cause me pain, and then that's so he attends wisely. This is suffering when he this goes through, and when he attends wisely in this way, the 3 fetters are abandoned in him, and that's stream entry, right? So stream entry is just sort of like you're like going, okay, this is what's going to take me. Enlightenment goes that way, and I need to face myself towards the path keep walking it and notice when I'm being taken off it.
All right. Let's put something together. What do you think is meant by the English language phrase stream entry?
I don't really know. I mean, I know some stuff about it, but I guess I don't really know exactly
Would
what it
it
would be.
would it have any different kind of connotation or meaning if I said it like this: swept away in a flood?
I guess it sounds a bit more mystical and a bit more like intense, yeah.
All right.
And I'm guessing what gets swept away in that flood is the me, or a chunk of the me.
Actually, one of the ways of looking at it is that the here now is in fact a flood. There
Oh,
is
okay.
so much stuff happening right here, right now. And so stream entering actually is a synonym for be here now.
Right. Okay.
It's a synonym for be here now, be in the stream, be in the flow. And in fact, that idea of flow is very, very much useful for people in the West who are practicing martial arts,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to get in a mind state so that you're actually in the situation rather than the way that we normally do it by mentalization,
Right.
that you actually get in it. All right. Examples of that would be in primitive times, 100,000 years ago, the dude's walking down the forest with his buddies. They've got spears, and all of a sudden they see a boar. And that boar takes off down through the jungle. He spots that boar and he's after it. And he's going to stay on that boar no matter what. He's going to have to jump over logs or crawl under a bunch of bushes or whatever, but he's going to keep his eye on that hog because nobody eats if he loses sight of it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So from very early times, humans have been able to focus, to keep
Mm-hmm.
straight, to watch
Mm-hmm.
what's going on. That's the kind of mind that we need to get in, or something close to that, so that we can at least stay focused and pay attention to what's going on. So this is the kind of mind that we want to develop, to get into the point that we're in the here now, that we're in the flow, and that we demand it of ourselves, because that's the only real way that we're ever going to be able to experience the Four Noble Truths, including the Eightfold Noble Path. Then, in fact, we were in order to get into the stream, to get into the here now, we have to actually be practicing much of the Eightfold Noble Path.
Right.
And so you begin to see, oh, wait a minute, all of this stuff really fits together. This is
Yeah.
really a kind of a small Chinese puzzle kind of device. And when I lay it out, then it looks really complicated. But when we start to put the pieces together, we can say, oh, yes, I can understand. Oh.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is an important, I think, way of teaching, so that the student begins to understand what the path that he's got ahead of him, and that we can also understand that, uh, let us say, predecessors, those who have been there and done that, can see when students reach to a certain point along
Mm-hmm.
along this along this path, and that the first step is noble. Oh, so many people practice meditation and never make that first step of coming to the point of having, beyond a shadow of a doubt, the knowledge that they can, in fact, clean their mind out and
Mm-hmm.
come to here now.
Mm-hmm.
And so the more we think about it, the more in that flow, the more here we are, and that the more unfocused and not object oriented the mind becomes, the more the impact of how much is going on all at the same time. It's sort of like taking a grander and grander view about it and recognize, oh, holy moly, there's a lot going on right now.
Yeah, I've definitely felt that sometimes.
All right, so that's the way to expand, is to expand into the here now, to begin to
Right.
notice that we don't have to take an object, that we can just sit here and just enjoy the moment.
Mm.
That there's and that takes the development of those powers also, which is also built into the four bases of power, which is also the four uh, first parts of the Eightfold Noble Path. All of
Okay.
it wrapped up in sati. Sati is the first thing to
Mm-hmm.
remember, to remember, to remember, to remember, to remember. That's where it starts.
Okay.
And the effort is to come out of wrong view into right
Mm-hmm.
view. Wrong view is, oh, this is hard, or wrong view is, oh, never mind, or all
I'll get
kinds
up and
of,
do something
yeah,
else. Yeah.
yeah. Uh, but always one's right view is to never mind, start again, come back, and let's gladden the mind. Let's
Mm-hmm.
make it perky, cheerful,
Big,
overjoyed,
big, deep breath with a smile.
interested, exactly,
Mm-hmm.
curious,
Mm-hmm.
interested, wanting to know,
Mm-hmm.
and also on guard, so that we can remain on guard, or not necessarily remain on guard, but often check out to make sure that there are no thoughts about the past that are going to take us into suffering, that we can sort of
Right.
come back and be here now. One of the examples of that is that after the child is asleep, think of it as a cradle in the West. In Thailand, they will have a lungi, or a cloth that they'll have an infant in, and that in the beginning, when the child is not yet asleep, you've got to watch the child. But after the child is asleep and everything is hunky dory, you don't quite have to keep your eye on it. You sort of have out of the corner of your eye and keep track of it. You don't have to keep track of it all the
Okay.
time, right? So that's the
Right.
kind of
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
you want to do it in your own mind, is sort of check in on a regular basis to make sure that the impetus of thinking about the past is right now sleeping.
Right. I found actually one of the ways that that sort of thing sneaks up is that you're thinking about the practice in the sense of like comparisons. So, and like sometimes it'll feel like, oh, I'm only thinking about the past to like make, to help me correct or whatever. But quite often that can be very dangerous, especially for me, because I find sometimes it'll be more like, yeah, I'm going to think about the past to help me practice, but really it'll be like, it's taken me longer to get to this state than it has for it's, et cetera, et cetera, instead of just going like, no, that's not important, and just being here now.
Exactly. That's taking something out of the past to compare to now.
Mm-hmm.
Bringing something out of the past has a magical quality to it.
Mm-hmm.
The magical quality to it is the memory of it is not the same as what actually happened. Cannot
Yeah,
be.
it's a recollection.
It's a
It's a
yeah,
construction.
it's a reconstruction,
Mm-hmm.
kind of based they think of it in the hologram.
Yeah.
And every time you cut a hologram, you can still see kind of the whole image, but
Yeah.
it kind of fades. All right, so that's what happens with memory. They're kind of being stored holographically, and so what we're able to conjure up is full of holes.
Mm-hmm.
That's another reason don't use that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't seem to work too well.
Well, the comparison, you're only going to be able to feel good or feel bad, and if you're not paying attention but you're doing it for those things, then you're not paying really attention to what's really going on in the moment. If you're really watching what's going on and have a reason to, there would be nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But mindlessly doing that is what we're getting out of.
Yeah.
And the easy way to do that is by barring the door to the mind of not letting the past in. That way you can let a few things in if it's necessary, because it'll always be necessary. But before we were just letting any old thing in. Now we're going to start guarding the door.
There's only VIPs coming into the mind instead of letting everybody into the lounge.
Exactly. What you'll find is that the mind likes to go to favorite places. This week it'll have this favorite place, and that week it'll have that favorite place, and whatnot like that. And the whole idea is just to wall the mind off. Just know that you don't go thinking about that. And start barring this up, and we know that we can do it. That's the whole trust is that we can in fact apply the mind to the things that we want to apply the mind to and keep it put to make it stay there. But in fact, this is the second noble step, as to where we have enough control over the hindrances that we can actually apply the mind and keep it focused.
Yep. So that would be, and would that be entering into the first jhana, like you said?
That's exactly correct. That's exactly right. And it has the rapture and pleasure born of the seclusion of having no hindrances in the mind. It's quite a pleasant state. It's also very much related to be here now. First jhana is very related to be here now. Because you can apply in this instant, you can apply the mind to what you want to apply it to and to keep it focused there, which is all done in the here now. And so once we have a mind that's fit for work, fit for applying it and keeping it focused, we apply it now, not so much in a haphazard way, but in a really clear, focused way. We apply it to the things that are worth being applied to, which is the teachings of the Buddha, the Four Noble Truths. Now, in the Sutta number 48 that we're actually using as a frame here, that's step 3, is stated in shorthand because it assumes that the students know that it's referencing other suttas, especially the Sabba-Asava Sutta.
So when you say step 3, is that the third principle of caudality, or is that
the third knowledge that is noble, supermundane, and a factor of the path? No, it's not a factor of the path.
Third. Here we go. Yep. So there is no understanding of a recluse or Brahmin. No, there's no recluse or Brahmin outside of the Buddha's dispensation that possesses a view such as I possess. Okay.
All right. So what that means is that all of the other teachings teach a self. The Buddha does not. The Buddha has something that in fact works.
Right.
That we've seen it, and we know that no other teaching that I've seen. Now, I will give credit for neuroscience. Neuroscience is closing in on the Buddha. They're only now about 50 years behind the times, but that's all right. They're only about 10 years old. They've only been doing real neuroscience for about 10 years. Before that, it was psychology, and I got to give a dead miss on psychology.
Yeah, it's a bit messy. Not very
business model issues and transference issues and other things like that. But let's not dissect psychology today.
We'll put that
I didn't bring my axe with me.
You said that rings very true to me. That's it. You know, I came to Buddhism. That's totally what made me come to Buddhism in the start as well. Was like, this isn't working. Like, it just felt like, and what you bring up, like this chat has brought up, is that So I remember saying to myself, this seems to be just patching holes as they appear, and I want something that's like gonna like not make me have the holes in the house, you know? Like I want something that's general and it works for everything instead of like, oh, this in this particular moment do this and you know do this thing, and whereas this is just like a general framework for everything, like, and that's why it works better than anything else.
Right. And it's always going in the direction of knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
not belief.
Mm-hmm.
It's always going in the direction of truth and facts rather than old teachings. It always goes in the direction of that what the Buddha taught 2,500 years ago. One of the qualities of it being noble is that it actually does apply right now, today, to everyone. And it applies in every case. In fact, the big problems with humanity is our own ignorance. Ignorance about how we feel. So we run around ignorantly wanting things and ignorantly not wanting things and ignorantly starting wars and setting boundaries, and we could have a 7 billion human being love fest.
I know that's such a. It's like it doesn't have to be this way, and it's like we even know we actually live in like Star Trek times as well. Like I'm talking to you in Thailand on this tiny little black magic box, and I'm getting the like it is Star Trek times, and we're just like nah, let's keep fighting, you know.
Well, actually, this is a good way for Buddhism to come out of hiding.
Right.
That there have been many attempts by several different organizations to stamp out the teachings of the Buddha on a wide basis, because generally the people who begin to understand the teaching of the Buddha start to behave differently that cannot be controlled. And possibly my favorite example of that is Angkor Wat. It's actually on the internet, and that you can learn about it. Angkor
Angkor
Wat.
Wat. That sounds
Angkor,
familiar.
Siam Reap in Cambodia. It was an empire during the Middle Ages, having 1 million people in a city, when in fact London had 20,000.
Oh wow.
All
Okay.
right, and that it was a strong Hindu empire that was protected by a huge forest, well guarded. They used a lot of rock. They built a huge number of temples, but it was also a city of wood. But the wooden stuff have melted away. But there's still places. It's just rich with artifacts. What happened was is that they were also very wealthy with gold. Um, the river that they were on backs up literally, because the Mekong Delta in Vietnam cannot hold all the water that comes down the Mekong River in the springtime. And so this particular tributary in Cambodia backs up. The Hindus were able to figure out exactly when that happened. They would have magical ceremonies, and they and the king really controlled the people, because as the river backed up, it created a pond. That pond, when it drained out, was enormously fertile and still is. And so that was a rice basket, all right? So they were really, really wealthy. But something happened. There were 2 invasions. The second invasion was a waltz. They just waltzed right in and took the gold. The first invasion bore no arms. It was all done by Buddhist monks. They actually brought monks in and converted the Hindus. And part of the conversion is that the people stopped caring about what the king wanted. They wouldn't join the army anymore. And within 50
Yeah.
years, the place had fallen apart. Wouldn't that be marvelous if that would happen in any name any country on planet Earth? If the people became Buddhist and nobody cared about the government anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that's what sort of why communism is particularly stampy with religion, I think. Especially in the East, they sort of really went nuts and tried to get rid of all of it, because it's communism. Communism's just a very schizophrenic king.
Actually, no, any of the form of governments always have someone who wants to be the big boss.
Yeah.
He's always generally the bully that never grew up. And he's also got other bullies, and they use violence.
Yeah.
And the problem is that when they use violence, other people become afraid.
Yeah.
That's the problem. If you have an
Right.
entire society of fearlessness, then when the bullies come by, everybody laughs and runs.
It's just a big game of chasey.
No, it's a matter that that happens whenever the police cannot control a society. And that normally happens during riot times, but it can happen through wisdom alone. That when nobody they don't do anything. They don't go to work and they don't pay taxes and they just live off the fat of the land and they enjoy their lives.
Sounds pretty nice.
Well,
sounds really nice, actually.
yes, well, people will go back to a subsistence living, but it's a happy lifestyle to do nothing. During hunter and gatherer days, they say that the people generally work only about 3 hours a day. How did he get up to 40 hours a week? And by the way, a lot of people are saying they work 3 jobs now and they still don't have enough. Not en- Here's the question, not enough for what? Not enough to buy the things they want, or not enough to buy the things they think they need because they've been told they need them.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've
So if people
noticed,
stop taking medicines, just wouldn't take them. Stop taking them. Unless you've got a really, really good reason of why you know you're taking a particular medicine. But if you need a second medicine to help that medicine, then both of them are wrong. Let's go find a third that can do the job right. So, bringing down the amount of medicines that a society takes, because that's a big problem in the United States. The people have been victimized into thinking that they're all sick and they need doctors.
Right. I actually stopped taking my antidepressant 2 weeks ago, I think. So, and it was.
Oh,
I think
poor
it
dear,
was,
you look so depressed.
yeah, look at me. I'm really, really broken up about it. Hey, I had and it was. I don't know if it was a 1-to-1 thing, but I remember reading like this guy did a study, and he said the placebo effect, and it was a very controversial study, as it would be, because he said basically the SSRIs don't seem to have any difference from a placebo effect. So basically, if you think, oh, this pill is going to make me feel better, well, yeah, it probably will.
Now, the
But
placebo effect, surprisingly enough, has an entire range. You can get placebo effects. The highest they've ever been able to get it is about 65% on a mass survey, but that generally requires hospitalization and surgery as part of the placebo.
all right, that's pretty intense.
But normally you can get it down easily without cutting skin down to about 45%, but the normal population are down about 25, 27, 28%. But it's fairly easy to get it up. Basically what that means is that 28% of the people are likely to believe any lie they've been told.
Yeah.
At a minimum. At a minimum, people believe lies they've been told.
Wow.
Now, one of the things that we should do with our children is to teach them to be careful not only about your own lying, because that's what normally they teach children, but to be careful about being able to detect other people's lying to you. But they don't want to do that because they want to lie to their children and make the children believe them. There's things that, oh, their ears are too tender to hear what really is going on. And so you can see it's all based out of fear. If the people would tell their children how to detect lies, what it looks like, change in voice, facial gestures, attitudes, things like that, and we all became fairly expert at detecting lies, the number of lies being told would drastically reduce. But we're all really ignorant about being able to tell who's lying and who's not. And that's important. They want us to stay that kind of ignorant.
A lot of money to be made from it.
So when we understand that there are forces that are working against us, and those are the forces who actually set the laws, rules, regulations, etc., like that, and they're setting those things, those laws, rules, regulations, etc., for their own benefit, not for yours. That's when you decide, I'm not going to listen to what they've been telling. I'm going to start keeping my eyes open to figure out what's the actual right thing to do right now and what's not right to do right now. And if people
taking
did
responsibility.
That, one of the things that'll happen is that people with that mindset will become less materialistic. They won't buy so much. They don't even go shopping so often. They may find easier or adequate housing that is more affordable rather than living in a big house. All kinds of lifestyle changes can happen when we start recognizing that a lot of my suffering comes out of my materialism. A lot of my suffering comes out of the organizations that I associate with. Better not to associate with any of those organizations. Political parties, churches, business, schools, whatever organizations they are, as they go up and down, you will go up and down because you're associated and identified with them. Better to not be identified with anyone. That way you can vibrate at your own frequency rather than identifying with anybody. The Buddha talks about that in the sense of being free from the banner.
Right, the banner being like a state or something you've identified with.
A flag, an icon.
Yep. This is me. This is something I believe in. Okay.
All right, so what we're really talking about here is that second fetter, Sila Bhatta Paramasa, is organizations want you to join them because then they can make you follow their rules. If you don't join them, then you don't have to follow their rules, except in the case of Christianity. They think that they can make their rules, make everybody follow them. The third on that list, can you read that?
Is this in the?
That's middle part of sentence number 11 in the Sabha Asava Sutta.
Okay, personality view, doubt, and adherence to rules and observances.
All right, so that second one then is doubt. What does that mean? Basically, is the big one is doubt about what is the path and what is not the path.
Right.
All right, so at that number 3 of in Sutta number 48, that third knowledge that we just discussed a few minutes ago, that third knowledge is the knowledge that the Buddha's path is it.
Sorry, I just had to quickly check it again.
Okay. Now, in Sutta number 24, it's stated in the following: knowledge and vision of what is and is not the path.
Right.
Knowledge and vision of what is and is not the path. So basically, these Four Noble Truths that give rise to the Eightfold Noble Path need to be dissected, vivisected, inspected, applied, figured out completely, so that there's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about the fact that with the mind investigated in this way, there is no self there. No doubt about it, that there is no permanent self, that there is only this process, the second noble truth, the suffering of wanting things ignorantly or trying to get rid of things ignorantly or actually delusionally. And one of the major delusions, by the way, is misunderstanding cause and effect relationships. Many students will see a cause and an effect kind of at the same time, or maybe even see the effect before they see the cause, and then they get it backwards.
Right.
Where A causes B in reality, but they think that B causes A in reality.
Yeah, okay.
And one of the big ones is, where does morality come from? What is the cause of morality? Wisdom.
Right. Okay.
When you see suffering and no suffering, morality will arise naturally. But for most people, where does morality come from? From following rules, doing what you're told to do, thinking you're going to get some benefit by following the rules. So now these are why these three fetters are put together the way they are. The first thing that we understand is that I am not what I thought I was. Therefore, I am whatever I am now. I am not subject to all of the rights, rules, and regulations, especially those that I thought were going to get me enlightened.
Right.
That whatever I thought was now, right, because now I know what is and what is not the path. And following orders, no matter who gave the orders, is not the path.
Right.
That we have to find out for ourselves what is the path. And we have to see so beyond a shadow of a doubt, beyond a doubt, we have to know that the Eightfold Noble Path is in fact the right path to take.
Right.
And so a lot of it is always about a change of attitude, and as we change the attitude, dedication is building up. More and more dedication to this Eightfold Noble Path.
Okay.
We become gung-ho about the Eightfold Noble Path. So I think this is a good time to stop. We stopped right in the middle of it, but this is a good time. Because we've come to that point of that step 3 of understanding how, in fact, Sutra number 24 and Sutra number 48 and Sutra number 2 fit together in this timeline sequence.
Right.
Of getting the mind ready to be fit for work, to have it apply and sustain it on those things which are worthy of being paid attention to, and then we pay attention to it to the point that we get it. Okay? And so these are the first 3 stages, and that will lead one through the stage of Sotapan up to about the halfway mark. The halfway mark is, in fact, the point when they say that we do have, in fact, the knowledge and vision of what is and what is not the path.
Okay.
And so now the rest of the part of becoming Sotapan, or the process progressing through the stages of Sotapan, has to do with the fruit. This is all the path. And so next time when you call, we'll discuss the fruit of the path.
Okie dokie. Sounds good. I'll do a reread these again with the the idea, what you said, the links in mind, and I'll really try and pay attention and see how it is. Like, I felt like I already could see something, like how they were connected, but it's sort of, you really sort of like jutted it out, you know, and it's like, oh, now it feels like I need to read these again, because it's like I'd be reading them for the first time properly, you know.
Yes, this stuff does take some time to get in. It needs to be covered over and over and over again. But the secret is to cover it over and over again with a mind that's fit for work.
Right.
And so watch closely, pay close attention. You'll get it. Oh, so many thousands have before. You're in a good spot to learn it.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Dhammarato. I'll call you. I'll call you sometime next week.
Okay.
Looking forward to it. See ya.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Sadhu.